The day the human female walked into our detention center was the day everything changed on Vortalis Prime, but not with explosions or gunfire or dramatic declarations of war. No, just footsteps. Light, confident footsteps that somehow managed to sound like a death knell to my audio receptors. I, Security Commander Krak Sunthar, third-rank official of the Vortalis Confederation and decorated veteran of the Proxima conflicts, watched from my surveillance hub as she simply walked in, past our outer perimeter, through 6 security checkpoints, past 47 armed guards, and not a single alarm triggered. Well, isn't this just spectacular? I muttered to myself, mandibles clicking in annoyance. Another glorious day protecting the most secure facility in the quadrant. The human female wore no armor, carried no visible weapons, had no technological augmentations that our scanners could detect. She was dressed in what my database identified as a business suit, dark blue with crisp lines. Her hair was a shade of auburn that caught the artificial lighting, pulled back in a simple arrangement that exposed her face. Completely ordinary by human standards. Completely ordinary, and yet everyone who encountered her either froze or stepped aside. Terminal 4. Identify the human intruder. I barked into my comm unit. The response came back trembling. Commander, that's Ambassador Julia Reeves. Ambassador? We received no diplomatic notifications. Check again. Sir, she's not. She's not here in any official capacity. That got my attention. I zoomed the surveillance feed closer, focusing on her face. Calm, composed, almost bored, as if strolling through a mundane shopping district rather than the most secure detention facility in Vortalis space. Then why, I hissed through clenched mandibles, is she walking unescorted through my facility? No one wanted to stop her, sir. I slammed my appendage down on the console. Because she's the human. The way my subordinate said it, capital H evident in his tone, made my exoskeleton tighten. Every species in the Galactic Confederation knew about the human. The one who ended the Crawl insurgency by walking into their headquarters and walking out with their surrender 90 minutes later. The one who negotiated the impossible peace between the Zyrtec Hive and the Free Systems. The one who, according to rumors I had dismissed as preposterous, once stared down a Vex Core battle cruiser until its captain ordered a full retreat. And now she was in my detention center, apparently heading straight for Block W, where we held the scourge of Antares. Lock down Block W immediately. Full containment protocol. I commanded, already moving toward the lifts. I want every available guard there now. Sir, came the hesitant reply, the guards are refusing to go in. I stopped mid-stride. They are what? They say they won't interfere with Ambassador Reeves. Several have requested immediate leave. 3 have submitted resignations. This was insanity. Complete total institutional breakdown, all because one unarmed human female decided to take a stroll through our facility. Fine, I growled. I will handle this myself. But the journey to Block W took precisely 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Every second felt like a small eternity as my mind raced through scenarios, protocols, and the frighteningly sparse file we had on Julia Reeves. Born on Earth. Diplomatic training. Psychological profile. Inconclusive. Combat capabilities unknown. Threat assessment, followed by a blank space where data should have been. When the lift doors opened to Block W, I was greeted by silence. Not the controlled, secure silence of a properly maintained detention block, but the eerie stillness that follows catastrophe. Guards stood at their posts, but their postures were wrong, rigid with tension, weapons pointed at the ground. Their compound eyes darted between me and the central detention area, and there she was, standing before the transparent barrier of the highest security cell, hands clasped loosely behind her back, head tilted slightly as she regarded its occupant. Inside that cell was Drakthar, the scourge of Antares, mass murderer, terrorist, mastermind behind the destruction of the Cassini colonies, responsible for over 30,000 deaths. a being so dangerous that the Galactic Confederation had unanimously approved his eternal incarceration without possibility of rehabilitation. And he was kneeling near the barrier, face all 6 of his visual organs fixed on the human woman. "Ambassador Reeves," I announced, approaching with what I hoped was appropriate authority. "You have entered a restricted military facility without authorization. I must ask you to leave immediately." She turned, and I experienced what many in the reports had described as the full attention of Julia Reeves. Her eyes, an unremarkable brown according to my species recognition database, somehow conveyed both absolute focus and slight amusement. Nothing physically imposing about her at all. Yet I found myself stopping 3 paces away, my combat instincts screaming danger in ways I couldn't rationalize. "Commander," she said pleasantly, her voice neither particularly soft nor loud. "I apologize for the unannounced visit. I was in the system and thought I'd save everyone the paperwork." "Paperwork," I repeated flatly. "For the transfer of prisoner Drac Thar to Confederation custody," she clarified, smiling as if we were discussing refreshment preferences at a diplomatic function. "There's been a development in his case. Impossible." The sentence was final. All appeals were denied. Her smile remained unchanged. "Not an appeal, Commander. Any new evidence. What new evidence could possibly?" "He's going to tell us who really planned the Cassini attack," she interrupted smoothly. "Aren't you Drac Thar?" The prisoner, the most hardened criminal I had ever encountered in my 67 cycles of security service, nodded quickly, all 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. "I will tell everything," he said, voice hoarse. "Everything I know. Names, locations, supply routes, everything." I felt my mandibles go slack. Drac Thar had endured 19 separate interrogation sessions, including deep psychic probing. He had revealed nothing. Our best interrogators had concluded he would rather die than betray his cause. "What did you do to him?" I demanded, moving toward the cell controls. Ambassador Reeves shrugged lightly. "We just had a conversation." "A conversation?" I echoed disbelievingly. "Yes," I explained his options. She glanced back at Drac Thar, very thoroughly. The prisoner visibly shuddered. "You threatened him?" I asked, suddenly uncertain whether I should be arresting her or protecting her. "Not at all." Her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "I simply helped him understand the situation clearly. The full picture, you might say." I looked from her to Drac Thar and back. Nothing made sense. My security forces were paralyzed. A notorious criminal was suddenly cooperative. And standing before me was an unarmed human female with no special physical characteristics, no obvious weapons, and no technological advantages. "Commander," she said softly, "you seem confused. You have compromised my entire security operation in under 15 minutes, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Without weapons, without violence," used doesn't begin to cover it. For the first time, she laughed. A short, genuine sound that somehow made the situation even more surreal. "Your security operation is fine, Commander. Your people made the wise decision not to interfere with Confederation business." She straightened her already impeccable suit jacket. "Now, shall we proceed with the transfer?" "I have a shuttle waiting." "I can't authorize this without." The communication panel on my wrist blinked urgently. When I activated it, Supreme Director Mulvan's face appeared looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Commander Zunthar," he barked, "you will provide Ambassador Reeves with all necessary assistance. The prisoner transfer has been approved at the highest level. I repeat, provide all assistance." The connection cut before I could respond. I looked up to find Reeves watching me with that same mild expression, as if she'd been expecting exactly this outcome. "How did you?" I began. "The paperwork moves quickly when properly motivated," she replied cryptically. "Now, if you will have your personnel prepare Drac Thar for transport, I'd appreciate it. We are on a rather tight schedule." I should have resisted, should have demanded proper documentation. should have followed standard protocols that required at least a 48-hour processing period for high-security prisoner transfers. Instead, I found myself ordering my still-stunned guards to prepare the prisoner. As they cautiously entered the cell drac, Thar remaining eerily compliant, I moved closer to Ambassador Reeves. "What are you?" I asked quietly. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Just a diplomat doing her job, Commander." No diplomat I have ever encountered can walk into a maximum security facility and leave with our most dangerous prisoner without so much as raising their voice. She regarded me thoughtfully for a moment. "Have you ever wondered, Commander, why humans were invited to join the Galactic Confederation despite our comparatively primitive technology and limited interstellar presence?" The question caught me off guard. "Your species showed potential." "Potential," she repeated, that slight smile returning. "Yes, that's the diplomatic terminology we agreed upon." Before I could ask what she meant, the guards had Drac Thar secured in transport restraints. The prisoner kept his gaze fixed on the floor, all previous defiance and rage completely absent. "Thank you for your cooperation, Commander," Ambassador Reeves said, her tone once again professional and pleasant. "The Confederation appreciates your service." As she turned to leave, escorted by my guards and the suddenly docile most wanted criminal in the quadrant, I found myself asking one final question. "Will he survive the interrogation?" She paused, looking back at me over her shoulder. "That's entirely up to him, Commander. Though I suspect he will find Confederation methods quite humane compared to the alternatives." The way she said alternative sent an involuntary shiver through my exoskeleton. "You are taking him to face justice," I stated, needing to believe that was true. "Everyone faces justice eventually, Commander. Some just require a more personal approach." With those cryptic words, she continued toward the exit, her footsteps still light and measured. The same unassuming gait that had somehow bypassed every security measure we had in place. As I watched the monitors tracking their progress through the facility, I noticed something strange happening. Birds who had been frozen in fear now straightened as she passed. Security personnel who had been ready to resign were returning to their posts with renewed purpose. It was as if her mere presence was recalibrating the entire atmosphere of the detention center. 2 hours later, long after the Confederation shuttle had departed with Ambassador Reeves and her unlikely passenger, I sat in my office reviewing security footage. I watched her entrance again and again. No weapons, no threats, no violence, just footsteps and words. My communication panel chimed. "Private channel. Secure." Her commander came the voice of Director Pelver from Galactic Intelligence. "I understand you had a visit from Ambassador Reeves today." "Yes, Director," I replied cautiously. She transferred the prisoner Drac Thar to Confederation custody. A long pause. "And how did you find the experience?" Something in his tone made me hesitate. "Unusual. But educational, I hope." "Sir?" Another pause. "There's a reason, Commander, that we allow humans to maintain their own embassies despite security concerns. There's a reason we grant their representatives unusual access. There's a reason, despite their technological limitations, that no major power has ever considered military action against Earth." I waited, sensing he was building to something significant. "The Zorvan hegemony didn't understand," he continued. "They thought humans were just another biological curiosity. During first contact, they decided to establish dominance by executing a human diplomatic team. I knew the broad strokes of this history. The hegemony's aggression toward newly discovered species was legendary. What the historical records don't include," Director Pelver said quietly, "is what happened after. How a single unarmed human walked into the hegemony's central command. How 12 hours later the entire Zorvan leadership signed an unconditional surrender. How a species that had terrorized half the galaxy for millennia simply stopped." My mandibles clicked nervously. "That's not possible." "Oh, but it is. The human who walked in? She was just a cultural tag. 26 Earth years old. No weapons. No army, just words. The implication hung in the silence between us. "Director," I finally asked, "what are they?" His laugh held no humor. "The official designation in the Confederation Charter is diplomatic specialists. The unofficial term used in security briefings is negotiators." "But how do they?" "We don't know," he interrupted. "We have studied them for centuries. Telepathy tests negative. No unusual biological compounds. No hidden technology. They are just persuasive." As our conversation ended, I sat back in my chair, looking at the frozen image of Ambassador Julia Reeves on my screen. An ordinary human by all physical measures. No weapons, no armor, no obvious advantages. Yet somehow the most dangerous being I had ever encountered. The records would show that she entered unarmed, and the killers surrendered instantly. What the records wouldn't show was the most disturbing revelation of all. Part of me had wanted to surrender too. 3 standard weeks passed after the incident with Ambassador Reeves. 3 weeks of rigorous security audits, personnel evaluations, and endless questioning from Confederation officials. My reputation, once sterling, now carried a permanent blemish. The commander who let a human walk in and take the most dangerous prisoner in the quadrant without proper authorization. Just another glorious day in the downward spiral of my career, I muttered to myself, scrolling through the latest security protocols that had been implemented after the Reeves incident, as it was now officially designated. The communication panel on my desk chimed with an incoming transmission. Priority 1. Confederation Central. "Commander Zunthar speaking," I answered, mandibles twitching nervously. The face that appeared wasn't the stern countenance of a superior officer ready to deliver another reprimand. Instead, it was Director Pelver looking uncharacteristically satisfied. "Commander, good news. Your presence is requested at Confederation headquarters immediately." I blinked all 4 of my eyes in rapid succession. "May I ask why, Director?" "The Cassini case has broken wide open. The real orchestrators have been identified. Drakthar's testimony was just the beginning." He leaned closer to the screen. "And they are asking for you specifically." "Who is asking for me?" His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "The humans, of course." 6 hours later, my transport docked at Confederation headquarters, the massive space station orbiting neutral territory Alpha. As I disembarked, I was met not by the security detail I expected, but by a single human male, tall for their species, with dark skin and a closely cropped silver beard. He wore the simple blue uniform of Confederation Diplomatic Corps. "Commander Zunthar," he greeted me, extending a hand in the human custom. "Marcus Donovan, Deputy Liaison for Special Diplomatic Operations. Thank you for coming on such short notice." I reluctantly touched appendages with him, noting the firm but not aggressive pressure. "I wasn't aware I had a choice, Deputy Donovan." He laughed, a booming sound that echoed in the docking bay. "Of course you had a choice. Everyone always has a choice. Some are just less pleasant than others." Something in his phrasing sent an involuntary shiver through my exoskeleton. "This way, please," he continued, gesturing toward a private transport tube. "There are some people very eager to meet you." As we traveled deeper into the station, Donovan briefed me on developments since Drakthar's transfer. The prisoner had indeed revealed everything: names, locations, communication protocols. Most shocking of all was the revelation that the Cassini attack had been orchestrated not by fringe terrorists, but by high-ranking officials in the Praxian Consortium with a supposedly neutral economic alliance. The evidence was irrefutable, Donovan explained as our transport slowed. Drakthar provided access codes to encrypted channels, financial transfers, meeting recordings, all verified by independent sources. "And the Praxians?" I asked, still struggling to process this revelation. His expression darkened momentarily. "Their representatives were invited to a special closed-door session 3 days ago. Ambassador Reeves attended personally. And? The entire Praxian governing board resigned within hours. They have agreed to pay reparations to the Cassini survivors. Their military leadership is undergoing a complete restructuring under Confederation supervision. I stared at him, mandibles slack with disbelief. They just agreed? To all of this? Donovan's smile returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's just say they found Ambassador Reeves' arguments compelling. The transport doors opened to reveal a conference level I had never visited before. The security here was subtle but omnipresent, sensors embedded in the walls, guards positioned at key intersections, surveillance systems tracking every movement. "Welcome to Level Omega," Donovan announced, "where the real work of the Confederation happens." He led me to an unmarked door that slid open silently at our approach. Inside was a circular chamber with a large round table. Seated around it were representatives from at least 12 different species, all senior diplomatic or military officials based on their insignias. And at the head of the table sat Ambassador Julia Reeves. She looked exactly as she had in my detention center, unassuming, composed, dressed in that same style of dark blue suit. When she saw me, she smiled and stood. "Commander Zunthar, thank you for joining us. Please, take a seat." Every instinct I possessed screamed danger, yet I found myself moving forward, taking the indicated chair. Donovan settled into a seat beside Reeves. "Commander," Reeves began, "your handling of our recent interaction has been deemed exemplary by Confederation standards." I nearly choked on my respiratory fluids. Exemplary? I failed to enforce multiple security protocols. I allowed an unauthorized transfer of a high-security prisoner. Her smile widened fractionally. You adapted to changing circumstances. You recognized when resistance would be counterproductive. Most importantly, you showed curiosity rather than hostility when faced with something you didn't understand. The representatives around the table nodded in apparent agreement. "Which is why," she continued, "we believe you are the perfect candidate to join the Interspecies Diplomatic Security Initiative." The what? I glanced around the table, searching for any sign that this was some elaborate punishment disguised as an honor. An elderly Tracelian cleared their throat. "N. Perhaps we should provide some context, Ambassador." Reeves nodded. "Of course, High Counselor." "Commander, what you are about to hear is classified at the highest level. Even among Confederation leadership, fewer than 100 individuals are privy to this information." What followed was the most disturbing security briefing of my career. Humans, it seemed, were not just diplomatic specialists or negotiators as Director Pelver had implied. They were something far more significant and terrifying. "Your species," the Traxian military commander explained, "possesses a unique neurological trait we call persuasive resonance. It's not mind control in the traditional sense, more like an amplification of certain cognitive pathways." In plain language, Donovan interjected, "When a properly trained human focuses their attention on you, your brain becomes extremely receptive to their reasoning. Logic becomes more compelling. Emotional appeals more powerful, and the instinct for self-preservation more acute. It doesn't work on everyone equally," Reeves added, noting my expression of horror. "And it can't make anyone do something fundamentally against their nature. But it can clarify consequences, help individuals see past their immediate desires to the longer-term outcomes of their choices. Like convincing a hardened terrorist to betray his cause," I said quietly. "Precisely," she nodded. Rakthar already knew he was going to spend his life in prison. What he didn't fully comprehend was what that meant day after day, year after year, alone with his thoughts and the weight of 30,000 deaths. I simply helped him experience that future more vividly. My mandibles clicked nervously. "And the Praxian leadership?" And Donovan and Reeves exchanged a glance. "Ambassador Reeves helped them understand the alternatives to cooperation," Donovan said carefully. "You threatened them with war," I stated. "Not at all," Reeves countered smoothly. "War was never mentioned. I simply helped them envision the complete consequences of their actions, political, economic, personal. When people truly understand all ramifications of their choices, they often make different decisions. The Vex Corps representative, a massive reptilian being whose species was notorious for their aggression, rumbled with what might have been laughter. The commander, before humanity joined the Confederation, my species was on the brink of launching a campaign against the Drellian systems. We had the military advantage. Victory was certain. What stopped you? I asked. The human diplomatic team requested a meeting to discuss alternatives. Our War Master agreed, believing it would change nothing. The Vex Corps' scales rippled in agitation. 12 hours later, he ordered our fleet to stand down and signed a resource-sharing agreement with the Drellians. They convinced him it was more profitable. I guessed. No, the Vex Corps said quietly. They helped him understand what it would feel like to be personally responsible for the extinction of an entire sentient species, to carry that knowledge for the rest of his life, to explain to his offspring why their future would forever be marked by an act of unnecessary genocide. A heavy silence fell over the room. This is why humans maintain a limited presence in Confederation space, Reeves eventually said. Why we agree to strict protocols about when and how our abilities can be used. We recognize the potential for abuse. Which brings us to why you are here, Donovan continued. The Interspecies Diplomatic Security Initiative is tasked with one primary function: to ensure human diplomatic personnel adhere to established protocols. My confusion must have been evident, because Reeves leaned forward, her expression serious for the first time. Commander, we need people who aren't susceptible to our influence to watch us, to hold us accountable. Your psychological profile suggests you have higher than average resistance. Your actions during our encounter confirm it. I recalled how I had still felt compelled to cooperate despite my misgivings. You call that resistance? You questioned me, she pointed out. You maintained enough critical thinking to ask what I was. Most never get that far. The implications were simultaneously flattering and terrifying. I was being recruited to essentially guard the Guardians, to monitor beings who could talk most species into anything. What exactly would my duties entail? I asked cautiously. You would be assigned to human diplomatic teams during sensitive negotiations, the Tracilian High Counselor explained. Your role would be to ensure they follow ethical guidelines, that they don't overreach. And if they do, you would have authority to terminate the negotiation immediately, Reeves said. No questions asked, no consequences to your career. Why would humans agree to this arrangement? I asked, still suspicious. Donovan sighed. Because history has taught us the danger of unchecked power. On Earth, before we achieved unified government, those with persuasive abilities often rose to leadership positions. Some used their gifts wisely. Others started wars. Reeves finished quietly. Genocides. Atrocities that still haunt our collective conscience. The humans who ended the Zorvan hegemony's reign of terror, I said slowly, recalling Pelver's story. She wasn't just persuasive, was she? She was like you. Reeves nodded. Mariana Vasquez, one of the first officially trained diplomatic specialists. She convinced the entire Zorvan leadership that continuing their campaign of conquest would result in their complete destruction. But that wasn't true, I pointed out. Earth didn't have the military capability to threaten them. No, Reeves agreed. But the Zorvan believed it because she believed it. That's the core of our ability. We can make others share our certainty, even when that certainty is based on incomplete information or flawed logic. Which is precisely why we need oversight, Donovan added firmly. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of protocols, regulations, and security arrangements. By the end, I found myself agreeing to a 6-month trial assignment with the initiative. Whether this was due to genuine interest or some subtle human persuasion, I couldn't entirely say. As the gathering concluded, Reeves approached me privately. One more thing, Commander. You should know that Drak Thar wasn't just a terrorist. He was a test. My appendages twitched in surprise. A test? For what purpose? To identify individuals like yourself who can maintain their agency in our presence. The Praxians have been monitoring Confederation security personnel for years, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Your facility was deliberately targeted. Eastin. So Drakthar was working for them all along. Not knowingly, but yes, essentially. She straightened her jacket in that now familiar gesture. There's a storm coming, Commander. Actions that believe the Confederation has become too complacent, too dependent on human negotiators to solve conflicts. They are not entirely wrong. I studied her carefully. And your solution is to recruit people who can resist you. Balance is necessary for any sustainable system, she replied with that slight smile. Checks and balances most of all. As I departed Confederation headquarters that evening, returning to my suddenly uncertain future at the detention center, I found myself replaying that first encounter with Ambassador Reeves, and how she had walked in unarmed, and the killers had surrendered instantly. Now I understood why. It wasn't just her training or her diplomatic status, or even her species' unique neurological trait. It was the absolute certainty she projected, the unshakable conviction that she would succeed because failure was simply not an option she could conceive. 6 months later, I stood in the observation room of a Confederation diplomatic vessel, watching as Ambassador Reeves, now my assignment, negotiated with representatives from the Helix Combine, a militant isolationist group threatening to deploy prohibited weapons against Confederation outposts. They will agree to disarmament within the hour, predicted Donovan, who had become something of a mentor during my training. How can you be certain? I asked, watching Reeves' calm expression as she listened to the Combine leader's angry threats. Because she isn't using any persuasive techniques yet, he replied with a knowing smile. She's saving those for when they think they have won the argument. Sure enough, 53 minutes later, the Combine representatives signed a comprehensive disarmament agreement that they had vehemently rejected at the start of negotiations. As they departed, looking somewhat dazed but satisfied with the outcome, I approached Reeves with my monitoring report. Ambassador, you exceeded protocol parameters twice during the final phase. Section 12.3 prohibits accelerated visualization techniques without prior notification. Instead of the defensive reaction I expected, she nodded. Noted, Commander. I will submit to the standard review process. Donovan, watching from nearby, gave me an approving nod. Later, as the three of us shared a meal in the ship's private dining area, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me since that first day in my detention center. Why me? There must be thousands of security officials with higher resistance ratings. Reeves and Donovan exchanged one of their communicative glances. Resistance isn't actually what we need most, Reeves admitted. It's discernment. The ability to tell the difference between persuasion and coercion, between guiding someone to a realization and forcing them to accept your reality. Most importantly, Donovan added, setting down his drinking vessel, it's finding individuals who understand that sometimes the most dangerous beings in the universe are the ones who enter unarmed. I clicked my mandibles in reluctant agreement. And the humans. Are you the most dangerous beings in the universe? Reeves laughed, that same genuine sound I remembered from our first encounter. No, Commander. The most dangerous beings are those who think violence is the only way to resolve conflict. She raised her glass in a toast, but we might be a close second. As our vessel proceeded to the next diplomatic crisis, I reflected on how fundamentally my understanding of power had changed. The galaxy had always feared weapons, armies, technology. But the true power, the power that had ended wars, toppled empires, and reshaped civilizations had always been much simpler. Words, delivered with unshakable conviction by beings who understood exactly how they would resonate in the minds of those who heard them. No weapons, no threats, no violence, just footsteps and words. And perhaps, with proper oversight, that was exactly the power the galaxy needed most.